What's up everyone, it's Benedict here, aka BHL Hudson. Welcome back to the BHL2 channel. Today we're talking about Zack Snyder, his fans, and whether or not his fans are toxic. Now to some I realize this might be like a is grass green type of question, but I think it's worth looking into in more depth because he was recently Snyder on the Happy Sad Confused podcast where he talked about a lot of stuff that we'll get to in this video, but one of the more quoted segments of it is where he was talking about his fans and how people think they're toxic. And if you think that, you can go fuck yourself. There's more to the quote than that. We'll get to it in its entirety. But considering the Snyder fans have been a massive part of the superhero movie online discourse for a long time, basically since BVS, in 2016, and then there was the whole Joss Whedon Justice League, they released the Snyder Cut, they released the Snyder Cut, then it's the James Gunn DC Universe. There's been a lot of time for Snyder fans to make their voices heard. And I thought it could be interesting to look at, are they toxic? And if there is, at the very least, a segment of the fan base that is, what is it about Zack Snyder's DC films that invites that, or that maybe draws more toxicity to it? I feel like there's an interesting conversation to have here. But first of all, let's look at the quote. This is from the Happy Sad Confused podcast via Variety is where I got this quote from. I would never say there's no way, Snyder said when asked about his fans' continued pleas for the Snyderverse to continue. I was on the ride that created Justice League, and if you were in my shoes, there were numerous times, dark times, when there was no chance that there will ever be my version of it. It will never exist. It can't. Politics, cost, politics, everything stood against. And yet it exists. The fans should never forget they did that. They also raised a ton of money for suicide prevention. They did a lot of good. They catch a lot of flack for being toxic or whatever, but they literally saved human lives. You can go fuck yourselves if that's what you think. So, a loaded statement there. I feel like it should be acknowledged off the bat that this is on a podcast. This is not like some statement he put out or like he got up on a soapbox to say this to people. On a podcast, when you take quotes from it, it's a free-flowing conversation. So, it's important to consider it in the context of like you're just having a conversation with someone. And the go fuck yourself bit, which was sort of the headline grabber out of all of this, it does follow on from when he's talking about how his fans raised money for suicide prevention. In case you don't know, Zack Snyder's daughter took her own life, I think in 2016 or 2017, around the time of the Justice League production, which is part of the reason that whole production, ended up the way it was. So obviously that's something that's very close to his heart. And yeah, I think obviously that is great that the money was raised for a good cause. In this case, he's also talking about like his fan base as a whole. And of course, there are different sides to a fan base. There are people who do raise money for charity and who are good people, and there are also maybe another side, maybe more toxic side. And even if the toxic people raise money for charity, it does not immediately mean that like there's no conversation to be had about that side of his fan base and the way they interact with people online, especially. Let's talk about the Snyder fan base. Are they toxic or not? First of all, I think it should be acknowledged, superhero movie fan bases, any fan base of such a mainstream property, are going to be enormous. So you cannot, single them into like one group. Like I was saying before, like there are multiple facets of a fan base, some good, some bad. I think it's more of a question of like how much good versus how much bad. But like I have lots of friends who are fans of Snyder. I'm not trying to like, I have black friends my way into the the Snyder conversation, but like I have one friend who honestly might be the least toxic person I know, maybe like the most wholesome guy I know, who loves, Man of Steel, BVS, the Snyder Cut. So yeah, this seems inherent, but I feel like it should be said because these conversations get so, heated and can feel like you're singling out every single person in a group of people. Obviously, there are many normal people who just liked the movies because they thought they were cool or interesting or fun. However, if we're looking at that like divide of good versus toxic fans, I don't think it's crazy to say that the Snyder fan base has like more toxicity than the average movie fan base. I think, honestly, for me, it is comparable to Star Wars in terms of like people getting mad about these movies and acting shitty to people online. And in terms of like the evidence you need for that, if you were on the internet around the time of like the Release the Snyderverse campaign, you've seen this kind of stuff. The word harassment is thrown around a lot. I don't know if like it's overused, but there were people who were insistent about this in a pretty shitty way on the internet. I think that's fair to say. If you look on Reddit of the like this article was posted and people were discussing like whether or not the fans are toxic, there are tons of stories of people who've had bad experiences with some of the more rabid Snyder fans. And also I think it speaks to the reputation this fan base has, that when I was thinking about making this video, like the first thought I had was like, do I want to deal? Like, is this worth the like possible hassle that will come with it? So the fact that is like a thought that I have when making a video, I think that does speak to the fact that there are people in that community who take it a bit far and who are a bit shitty about it. Yeah, and I have a note here, like I mentioned before, the doing stuff for good, the suicide prevention, charity, money raising, that's all fantastic, that's great. Again, that can be a certain part of the fan base, and even if it does involve some people who are more shitty, it does not, immediately absolve or like remove the need for like a conversation about some of the behavior of these people. So now that I feel like we have established, I feel like it's a general consensus, there is a level of toxicity in this fan base. I think the more interesting question here is what draws toxicity to certain fan bases, specifically the Snyderverse in this case. Because I feel like it's not coincidental. What is it about these movies that gets people to act like this, that creates this kind of atmosphere? And I've come up with a few ideas, and if you have, different ideas, I'd be interested to hear them. But this is kind of what I think. First of all, obviously, yeah, film fans, superhero fans, franchise fans, especially in the internet age, there's always going to be like a overly intense toxic element to some of them. And the internet has definitely exacerbated that. I feel like, I don't know, the internet's been around since the 90s, but mid-2010s movie discourse is when it started to get kind of deep for like on YouTube, on Twitter, and all this kind of stuff. So I feel like just the timing of it, when it happened, 2013, 2016, that contributes to it. In terms of the film specifically, I do think this feeling of outsiderness or being the only ones who understand the misunderstood genius creates a certain type of fan base. And this, I'm going to tie this a lot to Star Wars, because I feel like there are quite a few parallels here. But what you often hear from, the more toxic of the Snyder fan base is this kind of what you hear from the Star Wars prequel crowd. Again, not all of them, but some of them, where it's like, you don't get it. Like, it's not satire, it's like politically relevant, it's a deconstruction. We'll get to another Snyder quote where he talks about deconstruction, this kind of stuff. It's basically like, it's too smart for you to understand, you don't understand. And when like the entire world, all the critics, a lot of regular moviegoers have bad things to say about these films, and you like it, I'm not saying it's like a cult type thing or anything, but I think it creates a solidarity, and also inherently there's going to be some kind of anger there where it's like, you feel like people are not giving the thing that you think is smart or you think is, well done a chance. And you feel like in some way they're kind of making fun of you and calling you stupid when they say that the movie's stupid. So I think that adds to this like community sense, plus the maybe more negative emotions, anger, taking that out on people. In a similar vein, I feel like the darkness of these movies makes them feel more intelligent, or like it's cool to like them. Like taking a comic book character like a Batman or a Superman and making it gritty and intense and having him, kill Zod at the end and having Batman kill people and whatnot. Especially, I feel like if that is, sort of your first exposure to like a darker version of something or a deconstruction of something. Like I would think many of the Snyder fans, I guess, are around my age, where, I was 11 when Man of Steel came out. I was 14 when Batman v Superman came out, something like that. I think maybe that also adds this element of like, no, this is like genius, you don't get it type of thing. And I think tied to that, there is an anger at the new, possibly lighter / more corporate version of the property that adds to the animated anger there. Again, tying this to Star Wars, where people love the prequels, and then see the new films as like this corporate sanitized version, which I'm not saying there's no truth in that, but I feel like the new James Gunn Superman movie and his lighter, more fun universe adds sort of an extra angle of like, oh, this is silly, this is some James Gunn MCU style comic book bullshit. Like the real, like, I've seen Instagram reels and edits and stuff of like, DC now, puke emoji, and then like peak DC, and it's, dark and gritty, and it's Ben Affleck being dark, gritty Batman killing people or whatever. I think that these are all like compounding factors. I think there's like an inherent, toxic faction of every fan base, and these things add to the Snyder one having sort of an exacerbated version of that. This is not like a scientific thing or something I can like really point to exactly why, but I feel like expanded lore and universe and like getting really kind of into the nitty gritty of stuff, that also is tied to this phenomenon. Again, tying it to Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy is very universal, it's very mainstream, it's very easy to get on board with. It's a classic adventure, space, and you get like, okay, there's a big dog man, and they have blasters and all that. It's fun. The prequels, they get a lot more like into lore. They get into midichlorians, they get into Jedi history and, the history of Anakin and various things that come back in Clone War TV shows. And there's an expanded universe. And I feel like the Snyder version, or the Snyderverse, with Batman v Superman, with the Nightmare World, with time travel and the Flash showing up, and then the Snyder Cut, and again the Nightmare World with Jared Leto's Joker and whatnot. There's like a weird expanse, a lot to sink your teeth into, I guess, as like an enjoyer of like nerdy franchise stuff. That I don't know. I do feel like maybe draws people to this. Now the counterpoint to that would be like, well, the MCU is obviously, very an expanded universe that there's lots of lore to get into. But I feel like it's a different, like the MCU, not to call it like, it is corporate, but like it's more mainstream and understandable. Where like, to me, like as a casual fan of, the Star Wars movies, and I feel like the midichlorians and all the stuff in the prequels is like kind of like what the fuck is going on? I feel like a lot of people who I would watch those movies with who are not Star Wars fans would have the same kind of reaction, like, what the fuck is all this like Jedi history and all this like vaguely philosophical stuff? And I feel like there is that to the Snyderverse as well, where like if you watch Superman 2025 with the average person, it's like, oh yeah, it's a Superman movie, it's pretty fun, they go do a bunch of, fun fighting and he's a nice guy or whatever. And then you watch like Batman v Superman, it is fucking confusing. You're like, oh, so we're in like a nightmare world where he kills people, and then the Flash shows up like time traveling, and I don't know. I think there is an element to that. Maybe it adds to the like solidarity, like you don't get it, kind of like we are the Snyder fan base. We are not like the mainstream kind of aspect to it. I also think we'll talk about this, but another Snyder quote where the Snyder quote we were talking about before, where he was like, my fans, the fans should never forget that they did that, they got that movie. I do think there is like an incentive, bad behavior rewarded. I realize bad behavior makes it sound like I'm a fucking annoying principal or whatever, but like the toxic fan base that campaigned for this, I'm sure there was lots of fun, nice campaigning, but the people who were like really shitty about this, then they got it. They got the thing they wanted. And then, Snyder saying like, thank you for doing that. That was awesome. And of course, he's going to say that because he got to make his movie, the version of the movie he wants. But I do think that also adds like a bad thing of like, actually, when we were really shitty to people online, we got the thing we wanted. So like, why would you stop? So I feel like that's an element of it. And the last thing I'll say here, and this could be debated, again, I know Snyder fans who don't fall at all into this category, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't like some kind of vaguely right-wing adjacent thing to the Snyderverse. Again, I'm not saying that's the main point of this, but like Zack Snyder feels like a vaguely kind of, I view him a bit as like a Joe Rogan type of figure. He has been on Joe Rogan, this kind of stuff, where it's like there's a slight like anti-woke vibe to some, the way he talks and some of the stuff he makes. Cavill, I'm not saying Cavill is this way exactly, but because of, I think he made some comments about the Me Too movement at some point, I feel like he has been slightly adopted into, I see again some some edits of like vaguely right-wing, anti-woke, feminist-owned type beat, where like Cavill is a little bit of a mascot there. So I don't know. That is a toxic side of the internet, and I can see like at the very least a semi-crossover there between them. Again, I'm not saying Cavill encourages this. I'm just saying this is something I have noted. We move on to how does Snyder possibly feed into this entire toxic mentality and how this fan base builds up. And this is where I'm going to go through some more quotes from this Happy, Sad, Confused podcast that Variety picked out that I think are interesting and contribute to, like, I'm not saying he wants his fans to be toxic, but in terms of like possibly maybe even inadvertently, like he's not helping. I feel like this is worth considering. And also, I've gone into this video trying to be like nice and fair and not get too much of my own, because I'm not the biggest Zack Snyder fan, not a huge fan of his DC work. But I feel like here I will get a little bit into like, I don't know. I don't want to like be mean. I don't want to hate Zack Snyder. I don't despise his DC movies. I think there's some interesting stuff in Man of Steel, and Batman v Superman at least gave everyone a lot to talk about. And I think the Snyder Cut is actually, for all I just said about how it got made, it's actually probably the best one of the lot. Like, I actually think it's like pretty decent. But man, some of these quotes, I'm like, you make it hard to fucking, to not make fun of you, man. Because some of this stuff is, it sort of exemplifies some of the traits, or at the very least, some of the ways of thinking about these films that I've talked about. First quote here. My 100% honest reaction to BVS and how it's received in the world is, do you really want a movie that's had all the edges shaved off it by the focus groups? Do you really want a movie where the decisions have been made in a boardroom or tested ideas have been rendered for your enjoyment? Do you really want the Kmart version of your story? Is that what you really want? Now, I get what he's saying here, and I think there's a point to the argument of, like, I personally would enjoy a bad creative vision more than, like, a bad corporate vision. Like, I prefer a Snyder DC movie, or, like, I don't know, even, like, a Star Wars prequel, or Beau is Afraid is another example, the Ari Aster movie that was very, like, his vision, and I thought it fucking sucked, but, like, at least it was, like, a creative thing a guy made, to, like, the last Jurassic World movie, or Tron Ares. Those always just stand out to me as, like, the most corporate, bland, whatever, bad movies. And I think there's an argument also that you can prefer a creative bad movie to, like, a decent corporate movie, like something sanitized and kind of boring. I understand that could be more interesting. To me, at least, this is where my personal opinion comes in, but they were just bad movies as well. Like, I think this might not be a popular opinion to have, but I think there is an argument that a good kind of corporate sanitized version of something can be better than a bad creative version, just by the very merits of it being like a creative vision that you had. Does not necessarily mean it is good. Like, we had this, on the Poorly Planned podcast, we have an episode coming up about the Star Wars movies, and I was talking about how I like, episode 7, The Force Awakens, more than the prequels, where I acknowledge the prequels are, like, more of a guy's creative vision, George Lucas, and The Force Awakens definitely feels more like a boardroom-tested Disney, product-y movie. But at the same time, there's so much in those prequels that I think is, like, straight up terrible, like really, really bad, and, like, creative decisions that I do think The Force Awakens is a better film. Like, you can argue, is it more, interesting? Is it more, like, worth talking about? Whatever. But, like, in terms of actual quality, so when he's talking about this, like, do you want the Kmart version of the story? No, I don't want the Kmart version of the story. But that's not, like, an immediate get out of jail free card. It's like, well, actually, I did something weird and interesting, because it still was, like, just terribly written, in my opinion. I'm talking about BVS specifically. There's another quote here that ties into this. He says, you realize then that we were kicking the zeitgeist in the nuts and that we were going to anger people. I think he was talking about, like, the MPAA being mad about the movie or something. Not only do they not want their heroes deconstructed, they don't want their heroes battling each other on a road to deconstructing the why of their existence. That's another sacrilege. Now, this was the quote where I was sort of like, all right, this reminds me a little bit of why I don't really enjoy these movies, or have, like, a ton of respect for Zack Snyder, because to me this just feels like a massive cope for these movies, where it's like, I'm not a fan of this. My movies were too edgy for the public. Like, they didn't like it because it was, like, we were kicking the zeitgeist in the nuts. Like, he talks about Batman v Superman like it was this, like, radical, like, insane movie to make, when, at the very least, I can speak for myself. My problems with that movie, you can have problems with, like, Batman killing, it's too dark, whatever. But, like, making a dark Batman v Superman movie is not the problem. Do you know how many, like, dark comics there are? I mean, the biggest, The Dark Knight Returns, the comic it was based around. The Dark Knight Returns, right? Yeah, okay. I don't want to mess that up. That would lose all my credibility. But, like, that's a dark comic. Making dark comic book stuff is not inherently bad. It's because it was also incredibly fucking stupid. Like, that, it was, like, just poorly made. It was poorly written. The dialogue was bad. The reasoning, the logic was bad. Like, these are the things where it's like, I'm not mad that you kicked my zeitgeist in the nuts. Like, I'm not mad, but, like, I didn't like the movie because it was poorly written. And, like, and this is, again, ties into this where it's like people think these movies are really intelligent and they are deconstructive. I feel like he just throws around the word deconstruction as if it's, like, as if he knows what it means. Like, I don't think he deconstructed anything. I think these movies are deconstructive in the same way that the movie Joker was, like, deep and deconstructive. They feel like movies that think they're very intelligent, and, like, it's just incredibly shallow and surface level, like, even by comic book movie standards. Like, I remember, when I was a kid, I would watch Captain America the Winter Soldier and be like, whoa, this is super deep. This is, like, the world is morally gray. And then when you watch it as an adult, you're like, yeah, okay, it's a comic book movie. It's not, like, the deepest deconstruction ever, but there's something there, I guess. Like, I Batman v Superman, like, for example, the Martha thing I think is, like, indefensible. I just think that's, like, some of the dumbest and like kind of cringiest writing and delivery of writing in any superhero film. And that is not, there's no deconstruction of, you know, the morality there, that he realizes that Superman has a mom or whatever, and that he's actually, like, it's just bad writing. Or even, you know, Batman killing and Batman struggles in that movie. They're not explored with very much interesting depth. Like, I don't know. I just think, I don't know if he actually believes this or if he's sort of just kind of like trying to cope with it. But I think it's just a lazy excuse to be like, the movies were too epic and too dangerous, and people were not ready for my, you know, crazy, the twisted mind of Zack Snyder. Like, no, they were just kind of bad. I just want to note this Variety article that I got this stuff from. I kind of feel like history is being rewritten in this article a little bit, where they talk about the Batman v Superman box office. They're like, Batman v Superman opened, you know, to bad reviews from critics, but it went on to gross, you know, a crazy 874 million or something like that. And it's like, Don't try to rewrite history. Batman v Superman not grossing $1 billion was like a failure in 2016. The first ever movie featuring Batman and Superman, you know, in a main movie together, live action, big screen, that not getting $1 billion, that being bested by Captain America Civil War at the box office. I remember that shit. I was there. Like, that was a big deal. That was like kind of embarrassing. So to be like, well, I mean, it made $800 million. It's like, no, that was not, like, for especially 2016, the peak of the superhero movie genre. That was, that was not the success they're painting it out to be. And they also said something in the article about, like, you know, Snyder had 2 more Justice League films planned before, you know, the Snyderverse, you know, they moved on to the new thing. It's like, they didn't move, the movies ended because they were bad. Like, that universe was kind of an objective failure. Like, it had, you know, high points and things that people liked for sure. But in terms of, like, as a film franchise, yeah, it didn't just end, like, randomly. Like, the movies were not well received. A lot of them did not make, you know, as much money as they were hoping. I don't know. And I think it's interesting to look at, like, this sort of, you know, cope is an overused internet term, but this kind of mentality, does it hold Zack Snyder back from learning from his films? Because to me, I think Zack Snyder does seem like a pretty not self-aware and, like, in his own bubble kind of guy, where he has all these fans who call him a genius, and, you know, then he talks about how his movies were really dangerous, and not dangerous, but, like, you know, really going against the grain and whatnot. And then I feel like it's like an endless cycle where they kind of feed each other's egos, and they're like, yes, we are actually the smartest people. And, like, yeah, he's got, you know, he made the movies. I'm sure he thinks they're smart, but, like, not appreciating that maybe some of the criticisms were justified. I don't know if he said that in other interviews, but, like, from the stuff that I've seen, it doesn't seem like he takes, you know, criticism of the films in stride, when, like, I don't know, he really should. Like, if you look at his other films, you know, what the fuck was the movie he made? Rebel Moon? Those movies, you know, I did not watch them. Those movies seem to have a lot of the same sort of, like, you know, bland, poorly written movie that maybe thinks it's kind of deep problems. And, like, and for these Snyder fans who love these DC movies, maybe they love all of his movies, I'm not sure, but, like, wouldn't it be weird if he made, like, complete genius, you know, political deconstruction films these 3 times, and then, like, the rest of his films are, like, Rebel Moon and Sucker Punch and this kind of stuff? Like, I don't know. Like, and again, I guess this is probably also contentious, but, like, I think he made Watchmen, like, a really dumb version of Watchmen. I think Watchmen is an independent, you know, as a film on its own, kind of cool. But if you've read the graphic novel, it's like a slop version of everything the graphic novel is trying to do. It does not convey. So yeah, I don't know. Look, ultimately, I'll wrap it up. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with liking the Snyder movies, of course. You can like what you like. And I'm not expecting Zack Snyder to come out and be like, you know what, actually, yeah, you're all right. I made bad movies. My movies were stupid and dumb. Like, of course, he made them. Like, he's going to think that they have that merit. And, but I also think that I am allowed to say that, like, actually, I think those movies didn't pan out the way that, like, you know, with this epic universe expanded thing, not because audiences weren't ready for the, you know, the amazing mind of Zack Snyder, but more because they were just poorly made and they weren't very good. They were kind of stupid. That's my opinion. He can have his opinion. The Snyder fans can have their opinion. And in terms of the Snyder fan base toxicity, I think the conclusion I come to is there's obviously a lot of normal people, probably majority normal people. Like, here, okay, one more point I'll make, actually. I think in years to come, in decades to come, we'll look back on this time where, like, the internet was relatively new. And one phenomenon that will be noticed is that people, corporations, like, everyone took too seriously what the internet was saying, as if the internet is everyone. Like, you hear about, like, the internet buzz, and people on the internet are saying, and I think there will be a realization that, like, the internet, like Twitter, this kind of stuff, comment sections, it does not necessarily match what the average person thinks. Like, voices are amplified. Voices that are more toxic or more angry are amplified, where it can feel like everyone is an asshole. You know, everyone who wants a Snyder thing is one of these people who's going too far with it. But, like, it's because of, you know, algorithms. It's because of the kind of people who are more likely to comment and say, you know, the people who are going to be the loudest are probably going to be the people who are more assholes about stuff, in some cases at least. But I think there will be some kind of noting that people took the internet as, like, an assumption that this is what everyone thinks, when really it is a loud minority. Some people already, you know, think about that, but I think it'll be more prevalent in the future. But yeah, so, like, these toxic Snyder fans, there might be, like, honestly a majority of the people who like those movies who are just normal people, like, you know, my friend. Like, even I like the Snyder Cut. Like, I guess I'm a fan of that movie in a certain sense. But there's definitely a larger proportion of that fan base that is kind of shitty compared to other fan bases. And the reasons for that, I think, have to do with the kinds of movies that Snyder has made, and some of the ways that he talks about it as well. I'm not saying, I don't know if he knows that his fan base is like this, like when he talks about, like, people say it's toxic, but they can go fuck themselves. Maybe all he sees is the, you know, the people who raise money for charity and that kind of stuff, and the people who are just like, you made a cool movie that I liked. You know, that's fine. I find it a little hard to believe he's, you know, not encountered some of the shittiness of his fan base and seen some of that in action, but, yeah, for that reason, it's hard to say, like, Snyder, you should tell your fans to, like, chill out or whatever, because it does feel a little bit like he's encouraging it, you know, slightly. And he's clearly passionate about these films. He's posting on his Instagram all the fucking time, like, photos from these movies. A little bit of me is like, come on, bro, let it go. Like, you're not making these movies anymore. But point being, I'm not saying he's, like, actively encouraging people to be shitty or anything, but I do think the way he talks about the movies and his thoughts on them and the type of movies they are, perhaps just naturally leads to this kind of response, this kind of fan base. And maybe if he is aware of some of it, maybe he could be like, you know, to a certain segment of them, like, chill out a little bit. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the Zack Snyder toxic fan discussion thing. What do you think about all this? Do you think they're toxic? I'm sure there will be possibly some comments under this that aren't super positive. That's fine. But also, if a certain section of them are toxic, what do you think contributes to that in terms of the films, in terms of, you know, Snyder's way of doing things? Is there some correlation there, or is it just all coincidental? Who's to say? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're at it, be sure to like this video, check out my main channel where I do more edited videos, BHL Hudson, my podcast, we talk about movies, TV shows, a bunch of nonsense, the Poorly Planned Podcast, my Letterboxd, Real BHL Hudson, and my Instagram, BHL_Hudson. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.